Hello, I'm here to read for Books Not Bombs, and today we'll be reading How People Get Power by Kahn. Preface. This is a book about community organizing, written for organizers. Most of the material in the book came out of the author's own experiences as an organizer in the rural South over the past 5 years. If I have learned anything in that time, it is that there are really no rules for organizers, only experiences. I hope that this book will be read in that light, as the guide to one man's experience, and that other organizers will treat it as a scratching post for their own ideas. If the examples described here seem to refer mostly to the rural South, it is because that is where I have lived and worked. Hopefully, many of these examples will be useful in other rural areas of the country and in the cities, but the people who read and use this book will have to be the judges of that. It might be helpful to add a few words concerning what this book is not about. It is not in any sense a history of organizing, of the civil rights movement, or poverty in America. It is not a handbook for those who believe that society is about to move forward together, or for those who want to do something for the poor. It is not for those who believe that federal government and private industry working hand in hand are going to solve the problems of poverty and oppression in this society. This is a book for people who believe in people, in their dignity, in their determination, in their capabilities. It is for those who believe deeply that the problems of poor people will be solved by poor people working together. Many of the terms in this book have been used so long that they have acquired more meanings than any term is entitled to. I have tried to let my definitions of power structure, community, organizing, communication, organizer, leader, and many others emerge in the course of the book. If there were other words to use, I would have preferred them. It will be helpful to realize that each of these terms will have different meanings in different situations. Each person will have to define these terms according to his own beliefs and experiences, because this is how he will arrive at the definitions that will have meaning to him. I have used the term poor people to mean any oppressed, dispossessed, or exploited group within this society. I could as easily have used poor white people, black people, natives, Chicanos, students, draftees, minors, maids, women, welfare recipients, older people, or any of the other oppressed or exploited groups for whom organizing is meaningful. I hope each person will read this book in the light of his own experiences, and will mentally substitute for poor people his own group or the group he is working with, whatever it may be. The ideas in this book are not mine alone. They belong to the poor people of the South and to the organizers who have worked with them. It is my great pleasure and privilege to have known them. I would like to think that by the time their children are old enough to read this book, it will no longer be necessary. How People Get Power: Organizing Oppressed Communities for Action. Chapter 1. Entering the Community. For many years now, people in this society have been hearing about the conditions of poverty and oppression which exists within it. Some have listened more closely than others and, moved by what they have heard, have begun working with the poor and oppressed to help them change the conditions of their lives. Almost all these people have been sincere, dedicated, and well-meaning. Few of them have possessed the knowledge, experience, and skills to work effectively as organizers. Organizing is a technique, not a mystique. For all the romance about organizing, it is a discipline like any other. Some of the things which go into making an organizer are born with him. Most can be learned. There are skills, techniques, methods, which have been developed by past organizers and which have shown their effectiveness in numerous communities. The person who goes into a community without having taken the time to learn them may mean well, but he will have a hard time doing as well as he might have. Like any other professional, the organizer must understand and follow certain procedures if he is to be effective. The first decision as organizer has to make is how and when to enter a community. In some ways, this will be the most basic decision the organizer makes in his work, because everything he does after he arrives in a community will be influenced by the initial impression he makes and by how the community reacts to him. During the entry period, the organizer must make such basic decisions as who his first contacts in the community will be, which parts of the community he will try to communicate with, and which, if any, he will try to avoid, where he will live, how he will dress, how he will talk, and how he will explain to people in the community what he is trying to do. He may later change his mind about the way he wants to do some of these things, but for the most part, as far as people in the community are concerned, he will continue to be seen in terms of the initial impression he makes. An organizer only has the chance to enter a particular community for the first time once, and the mistakes he makes will stay with him as long as he is there. It is easy to underestimate the effect which the arrival of an organizer can have on a community. Communities, and especially small rural ones, tend to have fairly stable social structures. Of course, relationships among people in the community will change, but generally, the people in the community are known to each other. The organizer represents an element which is new to the community, which is unknown. He is above all a stranger. Out of curiosity, out of defensiveness, out of political and social habit, the community will react to the organizer's presence and will begin to analyze the organizer, his relationship to the community, and even its own relationships within itself. For example, take a situation which was fairly common in early days of the civil rights movement. A young white, middle-class student from a northern college arrived in a small, rural southern town and moved in with a black family. The arrival of the organizer produced several immediate results, of which the most visible was hostility and even violence on the part of the white community. Sometimes this was directed against the organizer himself, more often against vulnerable members of the black community. As a result of this hostility, the organizer was cut off from the white community. Such possibilities as working directly with the power structure or organizing among the poor whites in the community were abruptly ruled out. On the other hand, the arrival of the organizer often had immediate positive effects on the black community. By moving in with the people, the organizer identified himself with them, their problems, their hopes, their fears. Sometimes his arrival had an immediate catalytic effect on the community. Now that they had an organizer among them, people felt they could begin to take action. In other cases, the fact that in the beginning the organizer had identified with the people later caused the people to identify with him. Many direct action campaigns began as a reaction to the beating or jailing of a popular organizer. Most of these young organizers had not consciously developed a strategy for entering the community. In retrospect, however, it is possible to analyze the reasons why this approach was probably the best under the existing circumstances. In the Deep South in the early 1960s, few whites were willing to trust or even tolerate anyone working in the black community. Similarly, few blacks would afford to trust anyone working with poor whites or with the white power structure, even if the organizer had begun by working with the white power with them, would have been lost as soon as he began working in the black community. On the other hand, the hostility of the power structure to the organizer could often be helpful to him in gaining the acceptance of the black community. Under these conditions, little could be gained and much lost by attempting to work with the power structure. Though not a planned strategy, the approach used was one which was usually successful in gaining the confidence of the poor community. The proper time to make such an analysis, of course, is before the organizer enters the community he will be working in. Community here means those people the organizer is working with directly or intends to work with eventually. In the above example, the organizer defined his community as the poor black people in the particular area. Obviously, this group is a subgroup of other communities: town, county, state, black people, poor people, etc., depending on the kind of definition one is interested in making. But as far as the organizer is concerned, the option of defining what a community is belongs to him. He can make it as large or as small as he feels is useful in terms of what he is trying to accomplish. Once he has defined this community, however, he must be prepared to work and deal with all of its members. This is not to say that the problems of different groups in an area are not related. The problems of the poor blacks in a small southern town are closely related to those of the poor whites in that town, to the operation of the white power structure, and to political decision making on the town, county, state, and national levels. A good organizer will deal as well as he can with these different relationships. For example, it would probably be effective in the above situation to organize the poor whites in the area around some of the issues which they have in common with the poor blacks: unemployment, working conditions, housing, political representation, education. It would be necessary, however, to do this separately, using a different organizer from the one in the black community. Like it or not, good organizing today is best done almost entirely by organizers from the same background as the people they are working with. Blacks with blacks, mountain people with mountain people, Chicanos with Chicanos, students with students, welfare mothers with welfare mothers. In situations where race is a factor, it helps to have one organizer of each race working in the different communities and maintaining contact with each other only to develop strategies and tactics. Unfortunately, few organizers will be allowed the chance to develop their strategy for entering a community before they actually begin working in it. Only a few organizers today have the freedom to choose in advance the community they want to work in, to analyze it before entering it, and to put into practice all the strategies and techniques they have decided to use. Most organizers today work for agencies of one sort or another and are restricted by the rules, goals, and images of those groups. In most such cases, the organizer's main problem is how to disassociate himself from the poor image which the agency has in the community. Most agencies supposedly set up to help the poor, welfare departments, employment agencies, community action agencies, and the like, have extremely poor reputations among poor people. In any case, the basic rule for entering a community still applies. The organizer must define his own rule, even if it conflicts with that of his sponsoring agency, and develop his own strategies for putting it into action. These strategies will depend as much as anything on the personality of the organizer. Generally, an effective organizer will have a good deal in common with the people he is working among. In the mountains of North Carolina, for example, it helps to know a lot about fishing, hunting, pulp wooding, farming, trucks, country music, raising tobacco, shotguns, dogs, and religion. The reason is simple. Most of an organizer's time is spent talking with people, and people talk about the things they know. If an organizer does not share knowledge and experiences with the people he is working among, he will have a hard time communicating with them. Put bluntly, most good organizers have been extremely popular in the communities where they have worked. Again, the reasoning is simple. If people don't like you, they won't let you stay around long enough to organize them. Given the choices, then, an organizer should choose a community to work in where he has as much in common with the people as possible. Usually, however, he won't have this choice. This is especially true of those who come to organizing from middle-class backgrounds. Some of these persons have enough background in common with the poor to work and communicate with them immediately. If an organizer can pass for poor, he can realistically plan to take a job in a factory and organize from within. But if his middle-class background shows through to the extent that the other factory workers would be immediately suspicious of his motives for working there, he would probably be better off working under some type of established sponsorship until he builds up his understanding of the poor community and people in it. The approach to be used as entering a community, then, will depend on both the community and the organizer, and on the organizer's analysis of the type of relationship which is realistically possible between him and the people in the community. The type of initial contact which is made should depend on the analysis as well as the purpose for which the organizer is entering the community. One general rule may be helpful. If the organizer is personally more like the poor than like the power structure, he will probably be able to make his initial contact in the poor community successfully. If he is personally more like the power structure, the poor will probably identify him with the power structure no matter what he does, and he will be better off working somewhere else or in some other way. It is absolutely necessary that the organizer gain the confidence of the poor people. Otherwise, there will be no way he can work with them effectively. There are also reasons for making contact and establishing communications with the power structure. In some cases, it may be realistic to expect the power structure to eventually provide some of the things the poor want and need and to participate in the overall development of the community. This is especially true in small rural towns or counties which have little industry or agriculture. In areas like this, the power structure is often materially little better off than the poor people in the community generally. In one Georgia county in 1960, for example, there was no one with an annual income of over $10,000. In a nearby town, the mayor is a mechanic and the city councilman are a mill worker, a retired rural mail carrier, an active mail carrier, and a warehouse man. While these men do constitute the power structure, or at least the decision-making authority of the town, there is no real gap between them and the rest of the people. It would be short-sighted for an organizer to write these men off as power structure and ignore them, or worse, to deliberately alienate them. In this case, it is the interest of these men for the community as a whole to progress. This is not true, however, in most communities where an organizer will be working, particularly when there are significant differences of race and or class within the community. In areas where there are large numbers of maids, mill workers, tenant farmers, sharecroppers, miners, slum tenants, and credit buyers, the power structure will tend to oppose any effort to change the status quo. In such situations, efforts to enlist the power structure's assistance will result in frustration or worse, in changes which will hurt the poor people the organizer is working with. Even in this situation, though, there are good reasons for maintaining as much contact as possible with the power structure. If there is a conflict between the interests of the poor and those of the power structure, as there usually is, it is important for the organizer to know as much as possible about the people who are opposing him and what he is trying to do. By maintaining contact with the power structure, the organizer will have a chance to size each of its members up personally, to estimate their strengths and weaknesses, and as a result, to develop an effective strategy with poor people. Know your enemy is a good rule for organizers. In a conflict situation, the last people an organizer has to worry about are his friends. Consider a situation, for example, where the organizer has been successful in gaining the trust of the mayor in a medium-sized town. A poor people's organization with which the organizer has been working calls for a demonstration. If the mayor contacts the organizer and asks for his estimate of the situation, the organizer can say, "I think it's serious, and it will probably get worse if the city doesn't do something about their demands." Sometimes a prod like this will convince a city or county government that it should take a demonstration seriously, where otherwise it might be inclined to ignore it. A final reason for maintaining contact with the power structure applies in situations where the power structure is openly hostile to the aims of the poor people in the community. Often an organizer who is sophisticated in his dealings with the power structure can do much to neutralize this hostility. Sometimes, of course, hostility to the organizer and the people he is working with can help accelerate the process of organizing. People often respond when they feel they're being pushed too hard, but this should not be allowed to happen until the organizer has a firm base of support in the poor community. One of the first rules of organizing is don't get run out of town. An organizer who regularly drops in to visit with the members of the power structure, who is friendly, who occasionally helps them out in small ways, may still be hated for what he stands for, but he is less likely to be hated personally. If he can convince the power structure to at least tolerate him, he may be able to ward off some of the aggression which might otherwise fall on the poor people he is working with. In most areas, the organizer will be accepted most easily by the poor people if he is living in the area where they live, provided that he seems to them the sort of person who would naturally be living in that area. An organizer living on the right side of town may be more readily accepted by the power structure, but this will also hurt badly his acceptance by the poor community. Some organizers have successfully commuted into poor areas or lived in the area between the right and the wrong sides of town. This is possible in many rural areas where brick homes alternate with one-room shacks. Often, of course, the owners of the shacks are the folks living in the brick homes. But generally, an organizer who is working with the people should live among the people. How an organizer talks and the way he represents himself generally will have much to do with how he is accepted by different groups within the area. Honesty is key. Yale undergraduates don't talk and act like Tennessee Highlanders, and the organizers who try to hide or disguise his background is asking for trouble. Of course, some organizers with college backgrounds are from rural areas and are comfortable talking country. There's no reason for them not to do so, as long as they don't slip into Madison Avenue English from time to time. Whatever style of speech an organizer uses, it should be one he can maintain comfortably and in all situations. If an organizer has been talking country with the poor people and Harvardese with the power structure, he could be in an awkward situation if he had to talk with both groups at the same time. Whatever image the organizer presents should be one he is comfortable with himself and can comfortably maintain as long as he is in the community. Making initial contact can be a problem if the organizer comes into the area through the sponsorship of an agency, since he will probably not be able to choose himself which contacts he wants to make. Usually one of the heads of the agency will take him around and introduce him to people in the community. Sometimes the agency will introduce to militant poor people. More often, it will give him a guided tour of the power structure. All that an organizer can do in the latter situation is to grin and bear it, and wait until he has made a good analysis of the community on his own before following up on any of these contacts. The ideal situation is one in which the organizer has considerable time to study the community before moving into it. Occasionally, an organizer will be working in one community and will choose a second one, which he plans to begin working in several months or a year away. He then has a chance to casually survey the area, driving through occasionally, stopping for meals, dropping into stores to buy $1 worth of anything, asking directions, shooting an occasional game of pool, drinking a beer, asking questions. In this way, he can increase his knowledge of the community before he begins organizing it, and also pave the way for his actual entry by becoming more or less a familiar face around the town. By working slowly and carefully, he can develop a body of support for himself and his work before even coming into town. The organizer's way of entering into the community, then, should make it as easy as possible for the poor people in the community to accept and trust him. As much as he can, the organizer should try to be himself, but he should also realize that his standards may not be the standards of the community, and that by indulging what he considers to be his personal freedoms, he is limiting the opportunities of the people he is supposed to be working with. There is a place for organizers who can't live without drugs, Mao posters, left-wing books, rocks, beads, and overnight visitors of the opposite sex, but it isn't in rural communities where poor people are struggling for their rights. If a person is not dedicated enough to be willing to limit some of his rights in order to help other people achieve theirs, he has no business in organizing. Sizing up the community, Chapter 2. It is the organizer's responsibility, even before he enters the community, to analyze it as well as he can. This analysis helps him to put the work he will be trying to do there into perspective and to understand some of the problems he will have to confront. Without a good analysis of the area, there is danger that, at best, the work the organizer does will be fragmentary and irrelevant to the actual problems of the people in the community. At worst, the organizer's work may actually reinforce the conditions which make and keep people poor and powerless. No one analysis can be made which will apply to all the communities in which people are poor. In the mining counties of eastern Kentucky, the cases of poverty are close and contemporary. A local economy which depends on exploitation of the majority, the miners and their families, by a small minority, the coal operators. On the Indian reservations of the Southwest, the causes of poverty are historical. A national policy of systemic oppression and deprivation carried out almost to completion in the 18th and 19th centuries. Ultimately, the roots of poverty in the United States lie in a system of economic development which has denied rights and opportunities to those who could be denied them. There is a distinction, however, between those who were victimized in previous periods of time and are, in a sense, disabilities of the system, and those who continue to be exploited. This distinction is important because the degree to which the causes of poverty in an area are close and contemporary, that is, local, will determine the effectiveness of tactics which are developed and carried out on a local level. In a county where there is one major employer employing hundreds of people at minimum wage, it is reasonable to think in terms of strategies designed to produce higher wages, comprehensive fringe benefits, and improved working conditions. In counties where there is no major employer, solutions to the problems of poverty must generally be looked for outside the area, bringing industry in, carrying people out to where jobs can be located, or causing higher levels of authority, federal or state, to assume responsibility for those who, on a national basis, have been left in the economic backwater. In terms of tactics, the distinction is between confrontation at the local level and self-help, between forcing those elements in the community which are capable of eliminating poverty to do their job, and where these elements do not really exist, and where the leverage to influence change at a higher level is lacking, developing local alternatives. The preliminary analysis which an organizer makes of his community then is basically concerned with one question. Under ideal conditions, what could the community realistically provide in terms of decent living conditions for all its members? A number of more detailed questions may serve as guidelines in making this analysis. 1. How many people in the community are employed? What wages are these people employed at? How many people are employed? Are these people employable at jobs now existing within the community? Are they employable at jobs existing elsewhere? Could wage levels in local industries reasonably be increased? For example, many non-union metal plants in the South pay wages considerably below union plants in the same industry elsewhere in the country. On the other hand, the wage difference between union and non-union textile mills in many areas is fairly small. Is the community reasonably capable of attracting new industry? Is an effort to attract industry being made? If not, is a deliberate effort being made to exclude new industry in order to maintain a surplus labor pool and keep wages low? What sources of income do the non-employed have? To what extent are these sources of income beyond the control of local politicians? To what extent are they within this control? To what extent is this being used as an element of political leverage? What are the establishment's reason for seeking political control of the community? How is this control exercised? What percentage of people are poor? What percentage are members of a minority group? The answers to these questions will vary greatly depending on the community. For example, answers for a county in Georgia's Black Belt might read: 1. Some 700 are employed. About 150 are employed in 2 woodworking plants which pay minimum wage. About 150 are employed in pulpwood operation, paying $4 to $6 a day. About 200 work in agriculture at seasonal wages of $3 to $5 a day. About 100 are employed as maids at $10 to $15 a week. About 100 work out of the county at wages from the minimum to $2 an hour. 2. Some 400 people are unemployed year-round. Of these, about 300 are women. About half the total are over age 40 and would not be employed in local industry. They could, however, be trained for work in other types of industry, such as textiles, which are not located in the area. Those under 40 could work in the local woodworking plants. However, these plants are working at capacity, and in addition, they hire only white employees. 3. Local wages are considerably below national averages. The annual profits shown by the industries indicate that wages could be raised without impairing the ability of the industries to compete. 4. The community has all the assets which generally attract industry: highway, rail, and water transport, adequate electric, water, and sewer facilities, industrial sites, and surplus labor pool. However, no attempts are being made to attract new industry. In view of the fact that 450 of the 600 persons employed in the county work at below minimum wage, it is reasonable to conclude that a deliberate attempt is being made to exclude new industry in order to maintain the surplus labor pool for agricultural and pulpwood operations. 5. The unemployed exist mainly on Social Security and welfare. Since most jobs in the county are not covered by Social Security, the majority live on welfare. Members of the welfare board interlock with the county commissioners and their families and with the controlling interests in local industries. Local residents have attested that welfare and surplus commodities have been distributed on a reward and punishment basis. They are put on for voting right, docility, and good behavior, and cut off for voting wrong, agitation, or general troublemaking. 6. Profits from the locally owned industries depend on maintaining a group which can be exploited economically by seasonal work or by low wages. This in turn depends on keeping out new industry and on maintaining sufficient control over the labor pool to force its members to accept low-paying or seasonal work by cutting off welfare and surplus food benefits. The use of these levers depends on political control of the county. Number 7. 76% of the people are poor, 70% are black. From the analysis of this county, the organizer could draw several preliminary conclusions. That living conditions could be improved by forcing local employers to raise wages, and that new industry could probably be attracted. That part of the key to this lies in political control of the county, and that political control could probably be achieved. The emphasis in any strategy which was developed would be on confrontation, forcing existing institutions in the community to live up to their capabilities, rather than on self-help. For a second community, a mountain county in west central Tennessee, answers to the questions presented above might run as follows. 1. Little employment exists within the county. Those with transportation work in a large town about 40 miles east at wages ranging from $2 to $4 an hour. About 50 people work within the county in gravel operations at minimum wage. Number 2. About half of the adults are unemployed. Most of these lack the skills to work in the heavy industrial plants outside the county. They could probably be trained for light industry, but these jobs do not exist in the area. There is almost no agricultural, timber, or domestic work. Plants outside the county are unionized and pay wages at or above national average for the industry. The industries in the county, gravel pits, are marginal and probably could not absorb a wage increase. Number 4. Political and commercial leaders in the county have made a number of attempts to attract industry. However, the county lacks rail transport, there is no sewer system, and the water system is inadequate, and the nearest airstrip is 40 miles away. No industrial site has been developed. So far, no industries have shown any interest in moving in. 5. The unemployed live on welfare and Social Security. Both are apparently fairly administered. Very few instances have been reported in which these were used as elements of political pressure. Number 6. There is no real political establishment in the county. The major political figures are mostly small businessmen. Few have been in office for any length of time. Many of the elected officials don't run for re-election. Most have made some attempts to develop the county. 35% of the county is poor. 4% is black. In this situation, confrontation tactics at the local level would fail to produce significant results, simply because the county does not at present contain within itself the resources to provide a decent living for its residents. Confrontation tactics are basically aimed at the redistribution of wealth and other resources, and it is not always true that within a given community there is enough wealth to redistribute. The problem in this county is that it has been left out of the national economic mainstream. While on the one hand it is true that this imbalance should be readjusted, on the other, the county does not have within itself the potential leverage to force this change. In this situation, the strategy developed by the organizer would be aimed at self-help methods, at assisting the local community, including parts of the power structure, to develop itself. There was a real need for the organizer to maintain freedom from the preconceptions and dogmatized plans of action. One of the unique features of the political subdivisions within the United States is their diversity. There are states varying in population from 340,000 to 20 million, counties ranging from 2,000 to 3 million, and incorporated cities and towns with from 25 persons to 9 million. The power structures within these political subdivisions are equally diverse. It is important for the organizer to recognize that not all power structures are powerful, sophisticated, wealthy, or politically astute. In most counties, the county commissioners, sheriff, ordinary, clerk of courts, county judge, welfare director, schools superintendent, health director, school principals, mayors, and city councilmen are generally considered in some way part of the power structure. If the county only has some 5,000 people in it to begin with, and has to choose these 50 odd officials, the general level of ability is not likely to be too high. It is often also true that in such a county there is very little worth fighting over. This is not to say that there will not be fighting over what there is. Political contests are just as hard fought in poor counties as in rich ones, but there is little in the county to begin with. An organizer can present realistic alternatives for developing the county as a whole and can often persuade the members of the power structure that it is in their best interest to back him in what he is trying to do. To put it another way, a poor county, the members of the power structure are also often, from a national point of view, among the exploited. The differences among political subdivisions make very real the need for sophisticated community analysis. As far as possible, this should be done before the organizer enters the community. There are a large number of readily accessible sources which can be used at a distance to assist in the development of a good community analysis. Later, when the organizer has been working in the community for some time, he will want to make further analysis in the greater depth and detail on the basis of additional information which he can only get in the community or from personal contacts. However, he should still make the best possible analysis of the community at a distance before he begins working in it. One of the most basic sources of the information in the U.S. Census. Census volumes are issued by state. A complete set for any state consists of 4 volumes. Statistics can be obtained from these publications, which are useful in developing a community analysis. 1. County populations. Populations of towns, breakdown of population by age and race. 2. Income levels, broken down by categories such as under 500 annually, under 1,000, under 3,000, over 10,000, over 25,000. By doing some calculation, it is possible to come up with a figure for the total amount of money made legally in the county in a year. The distribution of categories is important. It helps to know what a county has no one earning over 10,000 or 5 men earning over 25,000. 3. Employment, broken down by occupational groups. From this, a good estimate can be made of the relative proportions of professional, skilled, semi-skilled, and unskilled job slots in the county, as well as of the types of industry and other employers in the area. From the census data, a number of important deductions can be made. In fact, a general economic profile of the county can be arrived at. The next step is to fill in the general outline with specific data. Much of this research can be done in the state capitol. The State Department of Industrial Development will generally have available a list of all employers in the state, which generalize statistics such as number employed, major products, gross sales, etc. If this is not available, visit the local library and get a copy of the directory published by the National Association of Businessmen, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, or the National Alliance of Businessmen. In some states, local area planning commissions publish detailed reviews of all local industries. If the plants are unionized, regional offices of the unions can often provide information. The United States Department of Commerce is in cooperation with state highway departments, publishes detailed roadmaps for each county in the country. These are coded in great detail. In rural areas, they show sites of industrial farms, houses, stores, schools, churches, post offices, state police barracks, prisons, filling stations, motels, factories, sawmills, radio stations, golf courses, gravel pits, and many other things. Considerable economic data not otherwise available can be obtained from these maps. Miles of paved versus unpaved road, number of houses on unpaved roads, often a key to the extent and distribution of poverty. number of vacant houses, often a key to migrant patterns, concentration of paved roads in a particular section of the county, often a key to centers of political influence, concentrations of population, often a key to the independence or dependence of people in the community. These maps also list all incorporated and unincorporated communities in the county, something the organizer should memorize. By using these maps, the organizer can familiarize himself with the county before he even sees it. As much time as possible should be spent in the files of the state newspaper which covers the particular area. The list of communities memorized from the county maps should be used as a guide. News stories will be preceded by the name of the community they come from. In particular, any names mentioned in news stories should be noted down. Any person mentioned in a state release will in one way or another be prominent in his home county. Most state newspapers also carry a list of bills introduced by the state representatives and senators while the legislature is in session. These can be a valuable clue to what the power structure of the county considers in its interest. Occasionally, the libraries in the state capital will have on file back issues of the newspapers from other areas. If the paper from the county the organizer is planning to enter is available, it can be an invaluable source of information. If not, the organizer should take the time after he enters the community to research back issues of the paper with extreme care. In addition to news stories, legal notices, society pages, and even obituaries, an aid in uncovering kinship lines can be valuable sources of information for the good researcher. Most telephone companies also operate statewide and will provide copies of local directories to people who can show a need for them. The listing in the Yellow Pages will provide the names of the doctors, lawyers, dentists, optometrists, building contractors, department store owners, cotton gin operators, and others who are likely to be key figures within the power structure. As a very rough guide, the size of the ads for business and commercial enterprises can be taken as an indication of their relative importance. The listing by name in the front of the directory should be gone through carefully. An account made of the individuals with each family name. This can be an important key to their relative importance and to kinship groups within the county. The telephone directory is in itself an important social indicator. Those listed are not likely to be among the very poor. Whatever the situation under which an organizer goes into a community, the key to a successful entry is a careful analysis of the community, made beforehand. Through this analysis, the organizer can decide how he wants to go into the community and what he wants to do once he gets there.